We often talk about holistic and integrated approaches in early childhood education and care. And Rhonda, I've heard you talk about the fact that we need to think about the national quality standard in that light too, that everything is connected. I'm wondering, what are the implications of that for sleep and rest for this 3 to 5 age group?
So when I reflect on some of the discussions that we had when we were developing the National Quality Framework, we really did see it as a really integrated and holistic approach. And as much as possible, we tried to focus on outcomes for children. And so, when you think about children's sleep and rest, yes, it does sit within Quality Area 2, children's health and safety, but there's linkages across all of the quality areas when you think about setting up environments that are restful and relaxing, relationships with children, working in partnerships with families and communities, having policies and procedures. The sleep and rest time gives such positive opportunities for to maximise children's learning.
I do see educators and who think about sleep and rest time and all routines as just another part of the day where there is opportunities for children to learn. I think during an assessment and rating that as assessors we look for educators' perspective of the child and looking at the child as the whole child, and that the rest time is part of the whole child and it is part of the whole program. So what do we see the educators thinking about and doing in their practice that determines that rest time is considered an important part of the day for fostering relationships with families, and thinking about rest time holistically for the child and also in terms of the whole national quality standard.
I guess encouraging the child themselves to identify if they are feeling tired and needing some quieter time or needing a sleep. And I guess we'd expect that there'd be some provision in the program for that to happen. If that child needed to have a rest or some quiet time before the time that they would normally have a rest, that is able to happen and evolve for that child. For the children who don't need it, they can still have their rest and their quiet time when it normally happens during the day. In terms of autonomy and decision making for that child, allowing the child the opportunity to make some of those decisions about whether they'd like to have a sleep, whether they'd like to do something quiet and restful like a quiet activity on their bed or reading a story or providing a table activity perhaps. Some services might actually take the children outside for a short period if, being outside, sitting reading a book under a tree or something like that could be quite a restful time, but still allowing that child the opportunity to do that. When we're looking at an integrated approach on a rating and assessment, for example, we would be looking at, for example, Quality Area 6 collaborative partnerships with families. We would expect that there would be some conversations with families around children's sleep and rest requirements. We'd expect that educators would have discussions with families about what's happening at home and then how that can be catered for in the day-to-day events at the service. So, for example, if a parent came in and said, my child's had a really big weekend, we've been very busy and my child may need a rest today, just see how they go.
Sometimes rest time can be stressful for families as well. So, it's a great opportunity to have conversations with families about how can they support each other, how can the service or the educator support the families in their rest time at home, and also to share information about the child's rest needs with the educators and work collaboratively together.
Our staff sitting down, engaging with children, reading stories one-on-one, or engaging with a small group of children at a quiet activity, rather than doing their cleaning or attending to paperwork. It'd be nice for staff to think about how they are engaging with children and encouraging those restful times and opportunities for interactions and things during that time.
And the National Quality Framework, including the underpinning regulatory requirements, allow that flexibility so that educators can support each other in terms of making sure that the sleep and rest time is a relaxing, restful period that does give you opportunities to look at the outcomes for children. I know what a really busy part of the day that can be. I know sometimes educators move quickly through the lunchtime break and sleep because they need to organise their own lunch breaks, and there might be some cleaning tasks to do around the service, but it's just such a missed opportunity.
The attuned educators, they implement a program that caters for all children's needs. So and they watch their cues, so they can still operate a group program, but providing for each child's needs and wants at that time. So if it means that they need to set up their physical environment in a different way so that all children can be outcomes and learning and well-being can be met, then that's what happens. They give children a voice, and children also get to have input into how their room is set up. So if they are feeling tired well before everybody else, they know how to access areas of their room that they can.
There's some myths emerging. I heard one the other day that there's a requirement in the National Quality Standard that you have to have a sleep period of 20 minutes, and that's not reflected in the National Quality Standard or the underpinning regulatory standards. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's more about being flexible and being able to maximise opportunities for learning through those routines, but recognising that individual children will have different patterns. It might vary, as you say, from day to day, and being responsive to that. And I've heard of educators requiring children to stay on, the whole group of children to stay on the bed for 2 hours so they can have their lunch breaks and do other tasks. And, that to me goes against what the National Quality Framework and the underpinning regulatory requirements are trying to foster in terms of that individualised responses to children.
If you were going to give educators a tip or something to think about in terms of quality practices for sleep and rest, what might you say?
Mine would be to think about sleep and rest and relaxation from the child's perspective, and really thinking critically about what does the child need and what will the child get from rest and relaxation.
Thinking about us as educators, how are we working together to support children during that time? If you have a room where children are doing quiet activities and not resting, can we draw staff from another room during that time to, I guess, work with those children, have those one-on-one times and support those relationships during the restful time, and just be there to interact with the children
And I think it's really important to reflect on practice, because I've been talking to some educators who have been engaging in action research projects and unpacking their sleep and rest routines and thinking about how that links with the philosophy of the service. And if you have a view, or if your philosophy reflects that you see children as capable and competent, well, how's that playing out in the sleep routines? If you're asking children to lie on the beds for long periods of time, how does that link with children having opportunities to make choices? So reflecting on practice and seeing this as a really important part of the overall program, I think, is really important as well.